A desperate cry for help. A missing baby. A community on edge. It began on the morning of August 14th when 911 dispatchers in Riverside County received a frantic call from a young mother. Her name Rebecca Haro. Through tears, she claimed she had been attacked in the parking lot of a shopping center in Yucaipa. In her words, a stranger had ripped her 7-month-old son, Emmanuel, out of her arms before disappearing into thin air. The image was horrifying. A mother left injured. A child gone without a trace. Within hours, the story spread like wildfire. Law enforcement swarmed the scene. Flyers were posted on street poles. Amber alerts lit up phones across the region. Neighbors joined hands, forming search parties. Across social media, strangers shared Emmanuel's photo, desperate to bring him home. Candlelight vigils flickered late into the night. Parents whispered the same chilling fear. If it could happen to Emmanuel, it could happen to any of our children. For a moment, the entire community believed they were racing against time to stop a predator on the loose. Every parent's worst nightmare had become a living reality. But what began as a cry for help would soon unravel into something far more sinister. Investigators now say the kidnapping never happened. That Emmanuel wasn't taken by a stranger hiding in the shadows, but that his own parents, Rebecca and her husband Jake Haro, may have been responsible for his death. Now both stand accused of murder. Their baby's tiny body has never been found. Tonight, we're going to take you inside the Riverside courtroom where Jake and Rebecca just entered pleas of not guilty. We'll examine the disturbing evidence, the timeline that investigators have pieced together, and the haunting mystery that still hangs over this case. Stay with me, because what happened to baby Emmanuel is more than a true crime story. It is a story about broken trust, unimaginable betrayal, and one heartbreaking question that still remains unanswered. Where is baby Emmanuel? To understand how this case shook an entire community, we need to go back to the beginning. August 14, 2024. That morning, Rebecca Haro, just 23 years old, picked up the phone and called 911. Her voice was frantic. She claimed she had been attacked in the parking lot of a shopping center in Yucaipa. She told police a man had rushed at her, struck her, and ripped her 7-month-old son Emmanuel from her arms before vanishing. The story was terrifying. Almost cinematic. A mother assaulted. A baby snatched in broad daylight. No witnesses, no warning, no time to react. Within hours, the Haros' lives and the lives of everyone around them were thrown into chaos. Police swarmed the shopping center. Officers canvassed for witnesses, combed through surveillance footage, and blocked off parts of the lot. Helicopters circled overhead while K-9 units searched the area. The public response was immediate. Amber alerts lit up phones across Riverside County. Emmanuel's tiny face, round cheeks, bright eyes was plastered across TV screens and social media feeds. Community members who had never met the Haro family dropped everything to help. They printed flyers. They organized search groups. They stood together holding candles, praying that somehow this baby would be found alive. For days, fear gripped the entire community. Parents clutched their children tighter. Schools sent out safety reminders. Strangers locked their doors earlier than usual, terrified that a kidnapper might be hiding in plain sight. But even in those first frantic hours, cracks in Rebecca's story began to show. Her timeline of events shifted slightly under questioning. Details about the supposed attacker didn't line up. And most importantly, surveillance cameras in the shopping center failed to capture any sign of a struggle. No suspicious man. No panicked mother, no baby being ripped away. Still, in those early days, the community held on to hope. They prayed, they searched, they waited for updates. But behind the scenes, investigators were already beginning to doubt the story. And what they uncovered in the days that followed would turn this case upside down. At first, the story seemed believable. A mother attacked, a baby stolen. But almost immediately, investigators began to see the cracks. When detectives sat down with Rebecca Haro to go over her account, the details started to blur. Times didn't line up. The sequence of events changed. The way she described her supposed attacker seemed inconsistent. One version of the story didn't quite match the next. So, investigators turned to what never lies. Surveillance cameras. They pulled hours of footage from the shopping center in Yucaipa. If Rebecca's story was true, the cameras would have captured at least a fragment of the chaos. A struggle, a man fleeing, a mother running for help. But the screens showed nothing. No stranger, no confrontation, no baby ripped from her arms. Witnesses in the area confirmed what the cameras suggested. They saw no frantic mother screaming for her child, no suspicious figures, no panicked chase through the parking lot. To detectives, it was as if the alleged kidnapping had never taken place at all. So they began working backward. If Emmanuel wasn't taken on August 14th, when was the last time anyone could say for sure that he was alive? The answer was chilling. The last independent sighting of baby Emmanuel came on August 5th, 9 days before the reported kidnapping. After that date, there were no reliable witnesses, no confirmed check-ins with doctors, no neighbors who had seen him. Court documents would later reveal what investigators had already suspected. Emmanuel's possible date of death fell somewhere between August 5th and August 14th. That means that by the time Rebecca claimed her son had been stolen from her arms, detectives believe he was already gone. When investigators pieced together the timeline, the horrifying truth came into focus. Emmanuel hadn't been kidnapped. He was most likely dead days before the 911 call was ever made. And suddenly, all eyes turned inward to his parents, Jake and Rebecca Haro. Within weeks of that August 14th report, the couple who once stood before cameras pleading for help were arrested. The charges were staggering: murder and filing a false police report. At a press conference, Riverside County District Attorney Mike Headstone didn't hold back. His words were sharp, his tone somber. He alleged that baby Emmanuel had been the victim of ongoing child abuse, and that in the end his fragile 7-month-old body simply could not withstand it. According to prosecutors, Emmanuel didn't die at the hands of a stranger. He died at the hands of those who should have protected him most: his own parents. The announcement hit the community like a thunderclap. Neighbors who had spent sleepless nights searching fields and alleyways suddenly realized the unthinkable. The threat had never been outside. It had been inside Emmanuel's own home. And then came another disturbing twist. The Haro's defense attorneys, they weren't new to high-profile child abuse cases. In fact, they had previously represented David and Louise Turpin, the infamous Paris couple convicted of abusing and torturing their 13 children in one of California's most shocking cases. For many, the connection was almost too much to bear. The similarities were chilling. The betrayal cut deep. For a community that had lit candles, whispered prayers, and begged for Emmanuel's safe return, the realization was devastating. The parents who had once been seen as victims were now cast as villains. And while Jake and Rebecca sat in jail facing the gravest of accusations, one fact remained unchanged, one wound still open: baby Emmanuel's body had not been found. September, Riverside County. The air inside the courtroom was heavy, the kind of silence that presses on your chest. Every eye was fixed on the two people at the center of it all: Jake and Rebecca Haro. Jake entered first. He was dressed in a red jail-issued jumpsuit. Not the standard orange. Red is reserved for inmates separated from the general population, isolated for their own protection because of the nature of their charges. His face was pale, his expression controlled, his words minimal. When the judge asked if he understood, he answered softly, "Good morning, Your Honor." Beyond that, his eyes stayed fixed forward, locked on the bench, never wandering, never meeting anyone else's gaze. Rebecca came next. She was brought in through a separate door. Unlike Jake, she wore a blue jail outfit. Her custody status wasn't immediately clear, but what stood out was her silence. She sat almost hidden behind her attorney, Jeff Moore, who positioned himself like a shield between her and the gallery. She spoke no words. She gave no expressions, and at no point did her eyes meet Jake's. Two parents, once bound by a child, now divided by the charge of his murder. Observers in the courtroom noted the distance, both physical and emotional. The Haros never looked at one another. No whispered exchanges. No stolen glances. It was as though they had already accepted that they were no longer a unit, but two defendants on opposite sides of the room. When it came time for their pleas, neither spoke for themselves. Their attorneys did it for them. Both Jake and Rebecca Haro entered pleas of not guilty to the charge of murdering their 7-month-old son, Emmanuel. The judge wasted little time in setting the schedule. On September 16th, The case would return for a felony settlement conference, a kind of trial readiness hearing where both sides would discuss their positions and whether any plea deal might be on the table. And on September 17th, the preliminary hearing was scheduled to begin. That's when prosecutors would lay out just enough evidence to convince the court that a full trial was necessary. The session ended without outbursts, without drama. Just procedure, paperwork, and dates marked on a calendar. But the silence in that courtroom said more than words ever could. And for everyone watching, the emptiest silence of all came not from Jake or Rebecca, but from the absence of the one who mattered most, Baby Emmanuel. For all the charges, all the courtroom dates, all the headlines, one truth still lingers like a shadow. Baby Emmanuel's body has never been found. Detectives fear what no parent, no neighbor, no community ever wants to imagine, that his tiny remains may have been discarded in a landfill. A baby treated like garbage. The words are hard to even say. A child who was prayed for in candlelit vigils, searched for by volunteers under the scorching California sun, may have been thrown away without dignity, without love, without even a final goodbye. The Cabazon home where the Haros once lived has been searched again and again. Investigators pulled up floorboards, scoured crawl spaces, examined every inch for the faintest trace of Emmanuel. But each time, they walked away with nothing. No crib where he once slept. No toys marked with his fingerprints. No remains to bring closure. And that absence has become its own kind of wound. For the neighbors who joined the desperate searches, for the families who once held candles and whispered prayers, there is no grave to visit. No headstone to lay flowers upon. No sacred ground to stand on and whisper, "You were loved, you are remembered." Instead, there is only silence. A silence that screams louder than words. Emmanuel's story is not just about loss, it's also about failures that came long before August 14th. Court records show that there were prior reports of possible child abuse in the Haro household. Red flags raised, whispers of concern, signs of danger. And yet, somehow, no intervention came. No door was opened soon enough, no official stepped in before it was too late. That is the question that haunts this case as much as Emmanuel's missing body. How many chances were missed to save him? How many warnings were ignored? How many cracks in the system did this baby slip through? And so we are left not just with the mystery of where Emmanuel's body lies, but with the deeper, more painful mystery of how a child could be so invisible to the very systems designed to protect him. A baby without a grave. A community without closure. And a justice system left to answer for its silence. As we step back from the timeline, from the courtroom sketches and the charges filed, one truth lingers above all. Emmanuel Haro never had a chance. He was 7 months old, too young to speak. Too small to defend himself. His cries could only be heard by those closest to him, and tragically those cries were ignored, silenced or dismissed. The justice system will play its part. Prosecutors will present evidence. Defense attorneys will challenge it. A jury will one day decide guilt or innocence. But no matter what verdict is read, one fact cannot change. Emmanuel is gone, and his absence will forever be the measure of what was lost. The haunting similarities to the Turpin case remind us this isn't an isolated tragedy. In both cases, warning signs were present. Neighbors, teachers, agencies, all glimpsed the danger. Yet somehow, intervention came too late. These failures are not just footnotes, they are cracks in the foundation of a system meant to protect the most vulnerable. And that's the painful question Emmanuel's story forces us to ask. How many other children are slipping through those cracks right now? If you've stayed with me to this point, I ask you to do something simple but powerful. Share Emmanuel's story. Let his name be remembered, not just as another headline, but as a call for vigilance and accountability and change. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. Because together, across cities and countries, we keep Emmanuel's memory alive. And if you want to continue following cases like this, cases where the truth hides in the shadows, and justice feels just out of reach, make sure to subscribe. This isn't just storytelling, it's a way to shine light where darkness tries to hide. Justice may be decided in court, but Emmanuel's absence will forever be the measure of what was lost.